welcome to our today's session about 10 tips for writing efficient C# code. Our today agenda, why we need efficient C# code. Tip number 1, using keyword. Tip number 2, for each loop against for loop or traditional looping. Tip number 3, string formatter or string.format against concatenating strings. Tip number 4, avoid using var keyword many times. Tip number 5, StringBuilder class for concatenating strings. Tip number 6, use async await keywords. Tip number 7, use nullable types. Tip number 8, use struct against using classes. When you must use struct and when you must use a classes. Tip number 9, avoid using ref and out as a parameters. Tip number 10, limit the using of lock if it is not necessary. Why we need efficient code? We need efficient code to write safe code with better performance. If you carefully apply these techniques and tips, you will achieve efficient code. It is really easy to write efficient and faster code. Efficient code not just only improve the functionality of the code, but it can also reduce the time and the complexity of the programming at all. Let's start. Tip number 1, keyword using. Keyword using ensures the disposal of a resource like file or a connection when it is not used anymore. So it will lead for a better performance and accuracy. The bad example here, we create a SQL connection, new connection, and adding the connection string. We started to make connection.open and writing something like insert command connection.close. This is the bad example, and I will highlight it now for you. This is considered a bad example as you are opening the connection and closing the connection by your hands. But to enable to make this automatically, you can use the keyword using. The good example, using keyword, managing and handling and checking to dispose a resource if it is not used before. Okay, let's move to Visual Studio to check a real code. Here we can find the bad example when we're creating SQL connection and we're adding the connection string. We are opening the connection and closing the connection. But if you are using the using keyword, you will create SQL connection, new connection, and you are adding the connection.open and doing your commands to insert, or update, your delete. So please use the keyword using when you are working with a file, stream, or a connection string and creating connection. The second one, tip number 2, the using of for each against the traditional looping. The for each looping is more efficient than the traditional for loop. As when you are using traditional looping, it's iterating through the index management, bounds checking, and a lot of things. So please, when you are working with collection, use for each. It will lead for better performance and accuracy. The bad example, as we can see, you making traditional for loop like for int I equals 0, I less than, numbers, dot length, I plus plus, console.writeLine, number of I, which is the array that holds 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. I can consider this a bad example as you are iterating over collection but using traditional loop. Now, the good example I need you to start with, please use for each. Good example here, please use for each as you are iterating over collection. There is no need again for index management or bounds checking. Okay, where is the index management or bounds checking? Here in the traditional looping. In the traditional looping like this here, checking number length and adding I plus plus. Okay, we can move now for Visual Studio looping. Okay, the bad example for looping that you are iterating over the numbers using traditional for loop for int I equals 0, I less than number dot length, I plus plus. But the good example, you can iterating over the collection using for each. Okay, now we have to return our third type slide. Tip number 3, please use string.format when you try to concatenate strings, not the plus operator. Please, it will lead for better performance as it avoids the overheads of creating and destroying temporary strings. Again, that is well handled and will lead for better performance in destroying and creating the temporary strings. Okay, so the bad example here, when you start string first name John, string last name too, the string full name, first name plus, and you add a space, last name. But the good example, here we can find the same first name, last name. The good example using string.format and adding the index 0, index 1, first name and last name. So please, when you try to make a concatenation between string, please try to use the class string.format. Okay, let's move to C#. Okay, the bad example, you're creating first name, last name. When you're trying to making a concatenation, you may using plus operator. But the good example, you can merge or concatenating the first name and the last name using string.format keyword. Okay, let's start tip number 4. Tip number 4, please limit the using of var keywords. Why? The var keyword always and allows the compiler to type based on the value after equal operator. So it's generally a good idea to explicitly specify the type of variable when the type is not provides the context. Okay, var x equal 10, var y hello. But the good example, x equal 10 as an integer, string y equal hello. Please, if you started to develop and you can expect the data type of the variable, please make the variable with the type you can expect will receive. I feel you don't have to make almost of the code and on all variables in your code in a genetic form using var. Please assign the variable and create the variable with the suitable data type. Now we can move to the C#. The bad example, you adding range with 10. The good example, int range equal 10, not var range equal 10. Var name hello, string name hello. Please again limit the usage of var keyword when you try to create variable. Okay. Tip number 5, the StringBuilder class is designed for efficient concatenating large number of strings. It avoids the overhead of creating and destroying temporary strings, which can improve the performance when concatenating large number of strings. Bad example, string, empty string, for loop, for int I equal 0, I less than 100, I plus plus, string plus equal I to string. I feel this is a bad example. The good example, using StringBuilder. StringBuilder result, string.append, I to string. Okay, we can move to C#, find the full example. Bad example, string result, and you making traditional for loop. Good example, using the class StringBuilder and making string.append. Okay, tip number 6, please, when you are working with a system and you need to improve its performance and response time, please use async await keywords. Okay, async and await are using and applying a concept of asynchronous programming. Allow your application to perform long-running tasks without blocking the main thread, which can improve the response time and the accuracy, the complexity, memory management, and a lot of things, as you are not blocking the main thread, which is the main issue that async programming handling. You are not blocking the main thread. Okay, now we can move for our example in C#. The bad example, we create a function with type void to start the process. You have an object, you make a delay and give it seconds. But the good example, use async and await, asynchronous and await. Okay, tip number 7, please, when you know the nullable data types or nullable types, allow a value type such as an integer or boolean to represent the value null. This is useful when a value may not be available or applicable. Declare a nullable integer. Declare a nullable boolean. As I know, may I will face not a true or false, and may I will receive from the application null, and the same in integers. So please, when you are working with boolean, with integer, and you can expect that you will receive a null value, not a true, not false, not zero. So please add declare a nullable integer or a null with this operator. Okay, and you can check if the variable has value, you write its value. If the variable has null or is null, okay, we will return a null. We can move now our C# nullable integer. We will create a variable of type integer. We will assign null value. If the number has value, we will return its value like 5, 6, 7, 8. If the variable has null, we will return null. Okay, we can move now for tip number 8, when you can use a struct and the class. The struct type is generally more efficient to use a struct for a value types that has small memory usage, as I will highlighted now for you. Small memory usage because value types are stored in stack instead of heap, which can reduce the overhead of memory allocation and garbage collect. Again, please, when you are working with a small memory allocation, start to work with struct, not class. So we can trying about creating point has x and y dimensions, so I must use struct for the point and give it public int x get and set, public int y get and set, not a class. Okay, we can move to Visual Studio to view the real code. Okay, bad example for point class int x and y, public y int and y, but the best and the good example to use struct point int x and int y. Okay, we can move to tip number 9. Avoid using of ref and out parameter. Please, the ref and out keywords allow a method to pass a reference to the variable instead of copy of its value, as you are passing a reference to the variable, not a copy of its container of values. Okay, while this can be useful in some cases, and it can make a code more difficult to understand and to maintain. So please limit the using of ref int x and out int y as a parameters of your function. Okay, the bad example, ref int x out int y, but the good example, int x out int y. Here you will not passing a reference to the variable. Okay, here you are passing a reference, but here you are passing the value itself for int x to be used here, to be assigned and duplicated by 2 and assigned to y. Okay, the last tip number 10 in our today's session, limit the using of lock, as when you make a lock over object, no resource can access this object, and it will reflect the performance of the application, as some resources need to access this object, and it will wait until you make a dispose to enable another resource to read. Okay, so please avoid and limit the using of keyword lock and the lock object. This section will be very critical of code. Okay, we can move now to C# code to viewing the parameter, good example and the bad example. The bad example, reference int y out int, reference int x out int y, x equal 10 and y equal 20. Good example, int x, not reference int. Okay, please, as we said, limit the using of lock. Okay, please sign up for Startup Hack to start learning more and more about efficient C# code. Thank you.